Hello and welcome to Walk the Talk Show with Waylon Lewis, coming to you live from Boulder, Colorado, with a fellow Coloradoan, the famous Fractivist himself, Shane Davis. He wears black and he's tough, and he wears sunglasses most of the time.
Most of the time.
Because his future's so bright. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So I just saw the film where you're the star of it, Dear Governor Hickenlooper, and I love the title because do we know if he's ever bothered to watch it?
We don't know, but it was certainly a collective of short videos and films by Coloradans for him. So he should.
I like that. Yeah, I'm a Buddhist person, as I've mentioned once or twice, and we always like to be respectful with the authority that we're criticizing at the same time.
I think we have the endearment on dear for him.
Well, we should hack his Netflix queue. Hold it up yet. So we begin these little conversations. This first video, there will be two. So if you want to watch the other one first, it's a free country, technically. We'll get into that. But this one's on the pros and cons of fracking. Obviously, there's so many pros of fracking, we won't be able to cover all of them. That was a joke. Cool.
A lot of them.
That's what Shane looks like when he laughs. I'm kidding. He's tough. And the cons, which will be easier to get into. Yeah. And then what's our second one on? I don't even remember.
What you can do.
Oh, what we can do. What we, the average citizen, or below average in my case, can do to actually, other than just getting riled up, what can we actually do to affect positive change for all of us, for those who want jobs, for those who care about our environment. My goal here, even though we are with someone who has a very clear point of view, is to have a conversation that reaches outside of the choir and that people can learn something from. So thank you again.
Thank you.
So we begin these with a bow of mutual respect, which is easy because I respect you highly. And if you're a viewer, you can also offer a bow. If you're a critic, pro, con, whatever, you can offer a bow of respect to this important conversation for America and for other countries. So the bow, basically, this comes from the Eastern tradition. You just take a good posture. And appropriately, you connect with the principle of the earth, stability, since we're here to kind of talk about the earth. You don't need to drill into the earth with your butt, but you can kind of just get stable. And then connect your head with the principle of the heavens, which is the principle of mission or vision, trying to be of benefit to all. Bring the two together in your heart, which is the area of friendship or society, politics, all that good stuff, and give it away. So we often begin these with a bow, or a meditation or a prayer, depends who we have on in aspiration. I thought I might request you to offer a sort of aspiration for what you want to see come out of all of this.
I think that the most important thing is to become very aware of how humans are harming the earth and how we are smarter than a fossil fuel. And we're an intelligent species in that we can create almost anything.
Yeah.
And so we need to use our hearts and minds. And the reason why we're advocates for the environment is because we love it. We love clean air, we love clean water, and we love our neighbors.
Right.
And so this is why I do what I do. It's not just a moral obligation, it's doing it out of love for the environment and for our mutual friends.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So how did you come, I'm sure you've talked about this once or twice, but how did your story begin to intersect with the subject of fracturing our planet?
It's interesting. I started in roughly 2010. I was doing some investigations on oil and gas and also toxic chemicals that were actually dumped in the ground. And I got
as a part of that.
As a part, but it wasn't really into hydraulic fracturing. It was just a toxic waste dump I had discovered, and it's still there. So I will bring that out someday.
Wow. Where is this?
This is in Denver.
Oh, okay. As long as it's not in Boulder. Not in my backyard.
You're fine.
Yeah, okay.
So I was doing some investigation with that, and then I got a phone call from somebody who asked me to dig up information on hydraulic fracturing. I didn't really realize what fracking was at that time, but I said, sure, I'll give it a shot, and I started data mining the state's website, COGCC, the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission's website, to try to find information for this lady because she had a fracking well near her home.
And it's a very handy, accessible website, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
User-friendly. Yeah. No. So you figured out how to kind of find data in this kind of incomprehensible.
Yeah, it's a
website.
labyrinth that, I've always often wondered if it's genius or it's the most daft thing I'd ever navigated in my life. And I'm suspecting it's the latter, because it took a very long time to map out the entire state's website and to extract millions of documents.
Yeah.
So once I realized that I had all of these failures of the state and the industry, these are official documents, I had to actually do something with it.
That's something interesting. I've been reading some of the coverage around your efforts and the sort of fracking activists, and the industry loves to criticize your numbers and all that, and one of your common replies is what?
My common reply is this, that I use the state's own data, so it's irrefutable. Even if they say their data is wrong, we're still right. That's their data that they stamped.
Right.
And so all of these failures are theirs. And this is what I've invited the governor to sit down at the table. And I've gone to the COGCC numerous times to show them their failures. They can change and better for the environment.
Do they appreciate that? Or
they don't know where the data comes from. So IT guys are always wondering where it comes from. And I say, well, it's your data. You guys are storing it. You should know where it comes from, number one. Number two.
Can you just show them how you found it?
I could, but that's their job. If they're going to make it that difficult for the people. Right. I'm giving them their data to show them their failures. Right. And I want them to do better. Like the setback of 500 feet. There was no actual formula, a health formula that was added into that to say 500-foot setbacks from an active oil and gas well to a home is safe. Because on their own documents, they show fluid migrations of over 1,000 feet or 2,000 feet that contaminate private water wells. Right. So they really need to address their own failures so that they can abide by their mission statement.
So can I ask, just maybe to set the plate or set the table, some dumb questions? Is that all right?
Sure.
Okay. So natural gas, like even 5 years ago, I feel like we all environmentalist types thought of it as, pretty good, right? Had the word natural in it, which we always liked.
Some people do. That's a greenwashing technique.
Right. But I mean, natural gas in our oven, natural gas buses, T. Boone Pickens was talking about it being preferable for trucking. And then we've extracted natural gas for a long time, right? Century, I don't know how long.
Quite a while.
Decades, without fracking that much, right?
Without using unconventional extreme methods, correct.
And fracking is like a pretty unconventional extreme method. Like, how does it actually work? Just in
As
brief.
defined by the industry, it's unconventional.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's drilling down to the shale formation where the
which is really far, right?
In some cases, it can be. Here, it's anywhere from 7,500 feet to sometimes over 14,000 or 12,000 feet.
7,500 feet to 14,000.
Yeah, roughly in between there. So
it's not just drilling down like for a well or something. It's like really far.
Yeah, and of course the different method now is that it's just not a vertical well like in the wildcatting days where they were looking for the anticline or that bubble of oil that would come out like
right. I'm rich.
Right. You got oil in your backyard.
Right. Awesome.
This is very different, where they have to use extreme methods and technologies to go down to the formation with perforation guns and explode the shale formation, and then force fresh water that's been chemicals have been added to it down into that shale formation at extremely high pressures and crack open that shale formation to allow the gas to release. Or oil, because right now about 90% of all the fracking in Colorado is for oil, not natural gas.
Oh, interesting. Wow. I'm so confused already. So basically it's an incredibly complex, expensive process to extract natural gas or oil. And then with natural gas, one thing I'm always irritated by is like we lose like 80% of it on the way until I get it to heat up my eggs or whatever, my vegan eggs in my case. You've lost it at so many different stages, right? Including the fracking itself.
Yeah.
So it's pretty inefficient still.
It's very inefficient. Just the drilling process itself, you get huge amounts of not only volatile organic compounds, those are hydrocarbon gases, but also methane coming out. And then once they want to stable the pressure under the ground, they burn it or flare it off, like in North Dakota and here in Colorado as well. So it's very inefficient.
So why is it so profitable if it's so inefficient?
Well, it's not really profitable right now, and that's why natural gas is not really the majority target for a mineral. That's why they're fracking for oil. Price of natural gas is too low. The LNG terminals, the export terminals to ship this patriotically to China are not in place yet. Once the price of
So I remember this from the movie, but so we're shipping our good old American natural gas or oil over to China?
Well, that's the anticipation. The Chinese Energy Commission visited Weld County, which in Weld County we have 22,000 active oil and gas wells, to make a deal to export a certain amount of Colorado's unnatural gas overseas somewhere else.
It seems like the most inefficient process.
It is. It's inefficient for all of us because we have to live with that collateral damage.
Right. It's almost as if someone would think of like manufacturing some substance out of oil over in China and then shipping it over here where we could buy it at like a big box store for less.
That's exactly what's happening. It's manufacturing and a consumer squeeze.
Yeah, so it's pretty messed up. So have you ever sat down with like a reasonable pro-fracking person and heard good points from them? And if so, could you repeat
absolutely.
one of those good points?
I think that, over the course of 4.5, 5 years, I've sat down with hundreds of industry folk.
Cool.
I've debated COGCC. I've sat with executives of industry. They have points, engineering points that I agree with, but the overall scheme of sort of destroying our lands and extracting unnatural gas, there's really no methodology behind that, and it's not something that we need, number one. So we clearly disagree on the type of energy source that they believe in and what I believe in. So we disagree there.
So why do you believe in, I assume, renewables or the potential of wind, solar, etc.?
Why do I believe in that?
Yeah, I mean,
sure.
Not just believe that it's good, but believe that it's practicable and affordable. And
well, it certainly is. I think, number one, we're smarter than a fossil fuel.
Yeah.
We have the technology to send things to the moon, to send things to Mars, to send back information back and forth. We have the technology. We just need the political will to actually say we want to create healthy energy that is thrivable, not just sustainable, but that we can all thrive in, that doesn't have extreme methods or extreme collateral damage to the environment and communities.
And could we do that right now, short term?
Certainly. We actually, if we could divert, let's say, 50% of the severance tax from the oil and gas industry in Colorado now, we would have huge, huge resources.
What's the severance tax, sorry?
Severance tax is when we extract minerals from the earth that the industry actually pays back to the state and those counties where it's being extracted.
So if we could use that instead or apply that instead?
Well, I think that, number one, the governor, the severance tax is about 2.9% in Colorado. And in Wyoming, it's almost double that or over double that. Let's look at Weld County. Weld County in 2012 had $51 million in severance tax, but yet 1 in 4 children still go hungry, according to the Weld County Food Bank. Let's look at where this money is being distributed. And why is it not being distributed in part into healthy energies so that Colorado can lead the way?
Right, and we saw that like when Obama came in office, and I think actually Colorado voted all this stuff in. I think I was involved in that, but I can never remember anything. I do too much, but or not enough. But anyway, when we started subsidizing solar to some small extent, the industry just blew up, and there are tons of jobs, great jobs, all domestic jobs. So we could do that again, right?
Well, absolutely we could. Those are going to be jobs that are sustainable.
Right.
They're not going to be transient jobs, because when the industry comes in and sets up a well, a derrick, they'll have those same people move from hole to hole to hole, and then they may even go to a different state if there's a formation where they have the lease, where they can make more money, what's more profitable.
Yeah.
Look at every well pad out here and tell me how many people are working on it.
Not that many.
Not that many. So it's kind of a treadmill system in that it's not really that profitable, number one.
Right.
Number two, it does not leave long-term sustainable jobs outside of reclamation.
It doesn't create community. It creates these sort of like nomadic campsites almost.
Well, it does. If you look at North Dakota, they do have man camps, as they call them, that are really putting extreme pressure, pun intended, on communities, in so much that in North Dakota, the price of real estate supersedes that of New York now.
Right, the rent for a trailer
crazy.
Off. Yeah. But a lot of strip clubs open up, so there's that kind of diversity and
I guess
cultural
dollar
enrichment.
by dollar, right?
Yeah, I mean, families have got to love that. So, so what else have we? So you got involved. What was the beginning of your story? Where are you at now? This is like a full-time thing now, right?
Well, once I realized that I lived in the epicenter of hydraulic fracturing in Weld County, I had over 75 active
Which
wells.
Weld County is just that way, right?
That way, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a kind of a sacrifice zone or colonized zone for oil and gas.
Huh.
They comprise about 45% of the entire state's activity. But once I realized,
Weld County does? Wow.
Once I realized I lived in that epicenter, and then I realized I had a bloody nose for a year and a half. I had migraine headaches. I had to figure out what was
from
going
all the
on.
fumes or what?
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
You can see in Dear Governor Hickenlooper, even at the end.
Right, right.
That is absolutely not a stunt. That is real. So,
but didn't Governor Hickenlooper prove that hydraulic fracking was safe because he drank one sip of it once, possibly?
Well, that's a great question. You know, to me, I think it's absolutely morally reckless for an elected official to do something like that.
But he's a geologist. I mean, many geologists are pretty morally reckless, aren't they?
When you drink orange juice or a citrus-based fluid that doesn't have xylene in it, yeah, maybe you can drink it.
Yeah. No, I was just saying to Rachel, who works with the show yesterday, that when I was in college or whatever, and we took a geology field trip, it was all about like cool rocks and like the history of the planet. And it was only later that I realized it's sort of like the minor leagues for the oil and gas industry. You know, we got Derek Jeter coming up. He's going to be a big star. He's going to exploit the hell out of Weld County.
Yeah.
It's
a last-ditch effort to extract the remaining fossil fuels that we have on planet Earth. There is
so why doesn't the oil and gas industry, or do they ever look at solar and wind and stuff like that and say, hey, we could make money out of this. Why don't we transition?
I've actually challenged them in that, with that question.
They just want to make money, basically.
If you look at every single well pad, it has numerous solar panels on it. And so the industry, the oil and gas industry, is using solar power to actually calculate their volumes and their dollars and cents. And there are many reasons why they use it, because a lot of these well pads are in areas where they don't have electricity. Right. They're not going to use their own natural gas, because if they did and there was an ignition source, the whole place could blow up. So solar panels are safe, they're reliable, and they work. So the industry, oil and gas industry, is one of the largest users of solar power in Colorado to this day.
I love that. That's the first happy thing I've heard today.
I know. So why don't they invest? I mean, they just by purchasing it alone is going to make the price go down in Colorado. If we had our own manufacturing plants here, wouldn't that be something?
It would be something. I mean, there's, the cliche for business people, like I'm an entrepreneur, is we always say, don't be attached to what you think your business is, be attached to fundamentally what you're trying to do.
Right.
And, the cliche example is like railroad companies were huge and dominated America, but they all made the mistake of thinking they were railroad companies instead of transportation companies. None of them got into the automobile or into trucking, so they all died.
Right.
Every one of them.
Right.
So, oil and gas. Although they're never going to run out of oil and gas, right? There's just so much of it.
There's just so much of it.
And as long as they're willing to destroy the entire planet to get it.
Well, that's the problem, is that the collateral damage of hydraulic fracturing, this extreme unconventional method, is enormous. When you look at, again, the state's oil and gas documents on remediations, right now, as you know, there's seismic activity, sort of a frack quake or an earthquake that is possibly linked to an injection site in Greeley. It's a no-brainer. When you have shale formations, as a geologist,
you don't want frack quakes in Greeley.
No, you don't want them anywhere. Especially when you have
50,000 cows per acre.
Well, this injection well holds roughly 143 million gallons of toxic liquid waste.
Wow.
Where is that going? If they're having seismic activity underground and they're losing pressure, that fluid is going somewhere.
Right.
It's going to find its way to a community's water source someday.
Right. So Gasland 3, you could turn on the spigot and cow poop could come out.
Well, Gasland 3. We'll talk about that.
It was on 2 or something. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So I have some questions from a friend of ours who works in the industry, because while I'm a bleeding heart Buddhist, liberal, vegan cyclist with a rescue dog down here, the rest of the world isn't quite as freakishly strange, and they have somewhat more reasonable questions, at least in their mind. So, and I do want this to kind of be a fair conversation. So, do we begin with individual level? Is that it? Rachel? She's Snapchatting. She's so into it. It's hard to get her attention. Do I begin with individual level? Is that it? Yeah. Sorry. What?
The internet's been a little glitchy, so maybe you want to cut this and then start back with questions.
How glitchy? Super glitchy?
Should cut.
Oh, bummer. Why don't you just cut it? She's in charge.